July 16, 1945, Jornada del Muerto Desert, New Mexico. The night is not fully gone, but it is thinning, turning from black to a deep bruised blue over the empty basin. Sand and scrub lie flat under a low ceiling of cloud, and the air tastes of dust and metal. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, a steel tower rises from the desert floor like a lonely gallows. At its top sits something that does not belong to any battlefield Japan has ever imagined. In a control bunker more than 5 miles away, men in khaki and coveralls lean toward instruments that glow faintly. The bunker smells of sweat, wet canvas, and hot wiring. Lieutenant General Leslie Groves stands hard-shouldered and silent, a man who has spent his entire war building a secret city of factories and fences. Nearby, Robert Oppenheimer is thin, his face sharp in the half-light, cigarette smoke curling from his fingers. His eyes keep flicking toward the clock and then toward the desert, as if the sand itself might answer him. Outside, the wind pushes against the bunker door. Rain taps in brief, nervous bursts. They had waited through delays, through lightning and changing forecasts, through the fear that a single storm could ruin everything. Now the final minutes grind down. The test has a code name that sounds almost casual. Trinity. But the men who chose it have not been casual for months. At the base of the tower, a handful of technicians and soldiers are long gone, driven away by strict orders and harsher dread. The device has already been armed. Wiring runs like veins. The bomb is not shaped like anything that drops from a bomber rack in Europe. It is a dense, complicated thing, heavy with lenses of explosive and a core that has been guarded like a crown jewel. Around it is silence, except for the faint scratch of radio and the occasional clipped voice calling checks. The final countdown begins. 10. Somebody swallows. Somebody else grips the edge of a table hard enough to whiten his knuckles. 9. In the desert, the tower waits, black against the sky. 8. Groves does not blink. Oppenheimer barely breathe. 7. You can almost hear the world holding its breath with them, though the world does not know. 6. A man at the instruments mutters numbers that sound like prayer. 5. The rain eases, as if the storm itself has stepped back. 4. In the distance, a line of soldiers lies flat with their backs to the blast. Goggles pressed to faces, hands over eyes, orders drilled into them. Even at this range, some feel their stomachs knot with instinct. 3, 2, 1. For a fraction of a second, there is nothing. Then the desert becomes a sun. A flash punches through cloud and night. White so intense it seems to erase the horizon. Even behind goggles, even behind walls. The light finds its way into eyes and skulls. The tower is gone, not falling but vanishing. The air turns solid. A fireball blooms, swelling upward, brighter than anything nature is supposed to make. It climbs with a savage grace, orange and violet and white, dragging dust and steam and shattered matter into a column that boils toward the sky. Then comes the sound. Not a single bang, but a rolling, layered violence that arrives like an oncoming train, like thunder multiplied until it becomes a physical force. The shockwave slams into the bunker and makes the walls shiver. Glass rattles. Men flinch despite themselves. Somewhere far out, sand leaps off the ground. The desert, a place built on silence, is briefly turned into an instrument that can only play one note impact. In the bunker, someone whispers without meaning to. My God. Oppenheimer's face is rigid, eyes fixed on the growing column. Groves is already turning, already thinking about what this means for the war and for the message it can send. The mushrooming cloud rises through the low ceiling, shouldering the weather aside, claiming the sky as if it has always owned it, half a world away. In Tokyo, the night is ordinary. Paper screens breathe with summer heat. Fans stir warm air that smells of ink and fatigue. Men in uniforms and formal suits sit under electric lights, speaking in careful tones about blockade, bombardment, and the Soviet Union, about how to endure and how to bargain. They do not look up. They do not feel the desert shudder. They do not see the new sun over New Mexico. Not yet. The light over the desert fades from unbearable white to a furious orange, then to a pulsing glow contained inside a towering column of smoke and dust. Men step out from the bunker in small groups, drawn by the need to see with their own eyes what their instruments have already proven. The air feels wrong, as if the sky has been scraped raw. Some stare upward in awe, others in dread, and a few wear expressions that look like grief. A radiological safety team moves with the urgency of men who know a new kind of danger is now loose. They carry Geiger counters that chatter and click, measuring an invisible poison drifting on the wind. A major in a steel helmet shouts ranges and bearings. A sergeant records numbers on a clipboard with a pencil that trembles slightly. Not from fear alone, but from the aftershock of adrenaline. The cloud keeps rising, broadening at its top. It is not the clean white plume of a fuel dump or the dirty smear of a conventional blast. It has structure and intent, a living thing that climbs on its own heat, its own violent physics. The desert floor beneath it is marked by a crater and a strange glassy sheen where sand has melted and cooled. In places, it glitters greenish, like something that belongs on the bottom of the sea, not in a New Mexico basin. Groves snaps orders. Oppenheimer stands apart for a moment, jaw set, eyes hollowed by sleepless weeks. The scientists speak in short bursts, half technical, half stunned. Yield estimates, timing, symmetry. A few laugh too loudly. The kind of laughter that appears when the mind refuses to accept the truth in front of it. Then, the military part of the machine takes over. Messages move through secure channels. Couriers and coded transmissions thread their way toward Washington, toward the Pacific, toward the men who will decide how to use what has been born here. The test has proved the bomb works. That one sentence, stripped of emotion, begins to roll outward like another shockwave. In Washington, President Harry Truman is in Europe, in Potsdam, sitting at tables piled with maps and demands. When the news reaches him, it is delivered in careful words, the kind that hide fire inside plain language. The effect is immediate. Shoulders straighten, voices sharpen. The United States now holds a weapon that could end the war without invading Japan, without counting the dead on beaches and in rice paddies. Or so it seems. In the Pacific, Admiral Chester Nimitz and General Douglas MacArthur are fighting a war that has become a grinding machine. Every island taken costs blood. Every day closer to Japan brings heavier resistance. They have heard rumors of something new, something secret. But the scale of it remains unbelievable until the confirmation arrives. And in Japan, where belief is shaped by necessity, the truth will take time to become real. Tokyo, late July 1945. The capital is scarred. Night after night, B-29 bombers have come like iron storms, dropping fire that crawls through wooden neighborhoods and turns families into ash. The government still functions, but it does so under an atmosphere of constant emergency. In the corridors of power, the language is restraint and endurance. Leaders cling to the idea that they can negotiate a better end, that the United States will not pay the price of invasion, that Soviet neutrality can be preserved, that one more decisive battle will force terms. In a dim office within the Imperial General Headquarters, a senior officer runs a finger along an operations map. The paper is worn, corners curled, dotted with pins. Some pins represent armies that are no longer armies but starving clusters, isolated and cut off. Others represent home islands bracing for attack. The officer, his uniform immaculate despite the strain, listens as aides read updates. Fuel shortages, shipping losses, city damage reports. He hears numbers, always numbers, and behind the numbers he imagines faces. A civilian minister sits nearby, shoulders heavy under summer heat. He has spent months balancing between military reality and the emperor's need for stability. In his mind, the United States is brutal, yes, but still bound by certain limits. No nation, he thinks, can create a weapon that ends civilization and then use it. Not in the modern world, not after all the talk of humanity, of international order. That belief is not kindness. It is a shield the mind raises when the alternative is too frightening to stare at. A different belief exists among Japan's technical experts. They have watched American industry from afar. They have read reports of factories that seem endless, of production numbers that dwarf anything Japan can manage. They know the Americans have brilliant physicists and vast resources, yet even they assume a boundary exists, a line beyond which science will not cross in time to matter. And that is why the first whispers of an American superweapon feel like fantasy. A report filters in through intelligence channels. It is thin, uncertain. Something about unusual activity in the American Southwest. Something about a vast scientific project. It arrives on a desk already buried under more urgent threats. An officer scans it, frowns, and sets it aside. There are bombers over Japan tonight. There are ships to hide, trains to reroute, anti-aircraft batteries to reposition. The war is immediate. A rumor about invisible lightning in a desert is not. Meanwhile, at sea, a heavy cruiser cuts through Pacific water carrying classified information to commanders who will soon be tasked with delivering the final blow. On distant airfields, crews train with new procedures, new targets, new security measures. Men in flight suits do not yet understand what they are being prepared to release. They only know the secrecy is thicker than anything they have experienced. Back in New Mexico, the crater still smolders. The melted sand still glitters. The desert wind keeps moving, indifferent, carrying traces of the blast across a landscape that cannot comprehend it. The men who witnessed the new sun begin to scatter back to their stations, to their paperwork, to their orders. They have made history. Japan has not heard it yet, but the shockwave is already traveling. Late July turns into early August, and Tokyo moves through its days like a wounded animal that refuses to lie down. The city is quieter now only because so much of it has already burned. Streets that once carried bicycles and school children are fields of charred beams. The smell of smoke never fully leaves, even inside government buildings, even behind polished doors. It clings to clothes and paper. In the ministry corridors, the war is discussed in fragments because speaking of the whole truth feels like inviting collapse. The cabinet debates how to approach Moscow, how to preserve the emperor, how to gain time. Military leaders talk about Ketsugo, the plan to bleed the invaders until the Americans agree to terms. There is a belief, hard as bone, that Japan can still shape the ending. And then a different kind of report begins to surface. At first it arrives as a passing mention, a rumor carried by a diplomat who has overheard something at a foreign reception. Then as a coded line in an intercepted message, a sentence that does not belong among the usual talk of troop movements and shipping. Then as a cautious note from an attaché, written in language that protects the writer in case the claim proves false. The Americans have tested a new bomb, not a bigger explosive, not a new incendiary mixture. Something else. Something that uses the splitting of atoms. In a small office lit by a single bulb, an intelligence officer reads the note twice, then a third time. He is trained to distrust exaggeration. He has spent years evaluating enemy claims, rejecting most of them, accepting only what can be verified. His pencil pauses over the page. If this is true, it changes everything. If it is false, it is a distraction. He carries it to a superior. The superior listens without interruption, face expressionless. He has seen enough in this war to know that miracles do not happen for Japan anymore. But miracles might happen for America. Still, the idea that the United States could build an atomic bomb in time to use it now feels like a story told to frighten children. He asks the practical questions. What is the source? What is the evidence? What is the estimated yield? How would it be delivered? Is it real or enemy psychological warfare? The intelligence officer admits what he must. The report is thin. The evidence is indirect. No photograph, no captured device, no pilot testimony. Just whispers and hints and the logic of American industry. The superior leans back. He does not dismiss it outright. He cannot. But he files it where dangerous possibilities go, when there is no time to chase them. He orders more collection, more listening, more analysis. Days pass. The air raids continue. Conventional bombs and firebombs still flatten what remains. Each raid reinforces what Japanese leaders already know, that the United States can devastate cities from the air at will. Yet this is a devastation they can at least conceptualize. Fire, rubble, death, horrible, but familiar. The atomic rumor is different. It has no shape in the mind. In Imperial General Headquarters, a senior naval officer speaks with clipped bitterness about American blockade and the strangling of resources. He has watched the fleet shrink to shadows. When an aide mentions the possibility of a new American weapon, the officer's eyes narrow. Not with fear, but with irritation. America will do anything to end the war quickly. Yes, but physics does not care about American desire. He says, Japan has scientists too. Japan understands what atomic energy implies. The technical hurdles are enormous. Uranium enrichment, critical mass, timing, a device that must work perfectly in an instant. Even for America, it is a mountain. A second officer, younger, more cautious, does not argue directly. He simply says that America has mountains of resources and has built factories we cannot even imagine. He mentions German research before the collapse. He mentions the way American bombing raids have grown more precise and more destructive. Proof of a scientific and industrial machine that never stops improving. The older officer waves it away. He has no patience for ghosts. Still, the rumor spreads because the mind cannot leave it alone once it has been introduced. A civilian minister hears it in a briefing and later repeats it quietly to a colleague. A scientist at a university hears it through a military connection and goes pale. In labs and offices, men begin making calculations on scrap paper, not because they believe, but because they must test the boundary of possibility. Some of those calculations are enough to create dread. The science is not fantasy. The principles are known. The nightmare has always been engineering and time now is what Japan has the least of. Within the Supreme Council, the inner circle that guides the war, the rumor is mentioned in a tight meeting. The room is formal, but the faces are tired. When the word atomic is spoken, a few heads tilt, as if listening for an echo. One member says it is unlikely. Another says it cannot be ignored. A third says even if it exists, America might not use it. The moral and political cost would be too high. No one says the deeper truth out loud, that Japan has already lived through moral and political costs that did not stop the firebombing of Tokyo, the burning of Osaka, the destruction of entire neighborhoods in a single night. If the Americans have this weapon, what would stop them from dropping it? The discussion ends without resolution. It has to. There are too many immediate crises. There is still the hope that Soviet mediation will provide a pathway. There is still the belief that an invasion will be so costly the Americans will hesitate. Then, in the Pacific, the American machine aligns. On Tinian Island, crews prepare an aircraft unlike the usual bombers in one crucial way. Its mission is wrapped in layers of secrecy. The bomber is a B-29 Silver and wide-winged. with a name painted on its fuselage that will soon be spoken around the world. Its crew practices checklists and timing. The bomb it will carry is not tested the way the desert device was tested. It is assumed to work. And in Tokyo, Japanese leaders continue to underestimate what they cannot see. The rumor has not become a fact yet. Not until a morning arrives when the sky itself will deliver proof. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima, Japan. Morning heat already clings to the streets. The city wakes with the cautious rhythm of a nation under siege. But Hiroshima still looks more intact than many other places. There are factories here, military facilities, rail lines, bridges. The river splits and braids through the city like dark ribbon. Students in uniforms move in small groups. Workers bicycle toward plants. A few children pause to watch the sky, because the sky has become a place of fear. At high altitude, nearly invisible against the pale blue, a single B-29 approaches. Its 4 engines hum with steady confidence. The aircraft is the Enola Gay, and inside it, Colonel Paul Tibbets sits with a calm that has been trained into him. The crew members speak in clipped phrases. Hands move over switches. The bomb in the bay is massive, unfamiliar. A long steel cylinder that holds a physics experiment turned into a weapon. Japanese radar stations detect aircraft, but it is only one. Perhaps a small formation. The warnings are issued and then softened. There are many raids, many false alarms, many flights that pass without dropping. Fighters are scarce. Fuel is precious. The city's air raid alert is raised, then lowered. People step back outside, because life has to continue between disasters. Below, Hiroshima is a grid of rooftops, riverbanks, tram lines, schools, and military offices. A doctor checks supplies in a clinic. A clerk stamps papers. A mother lifts a bucket of water. A soldier walks along a street with his cap tilted against the sun. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb releases. It falls cleanly. A silent drop, and for a few seconds it is simply an object descending through air. Then a fuse initiates a chain of events that no Japanese leader in Tokyo can yet imagine, because imagination still depends on the past. The bomb detonates in the air above the city. There is a flash that turns every shadow into a photograph burned onto surfaces. A sphere of light expands faster than thought. The temperature at the center is beyond the scale of ordinary war. It is not like a firebomb. It is not like high explosive. It is like the inside of a star, suddenly present above a living city. The blast wave follows, a wall of pressure that shatters windows, then walls, then bodies. Buildings buckle as if made of paper. Roof tiles become blades. Wooden houses collapse into flame. The river boils in places, steam rising in furious sheets. People who were standing one moment are thrown like dolls the next. Some are killed instantly, vaporized near the center, erased so completely that the mind refuses to accept it as real. Then comes the fire. A firestorm begins to feed on itself. Air rushes inward. Wind becomes a roaring inhale. Flames leap from street to street. Clothing ignites. Hair burns. Skin blisters and peels. Those who survive the initial blast stumble through a world turned into red fog and black debris. They do not know what has happened. They only know the sky has fallen. In the first minutes, communication dies. Telephone lines are severed. Radio stations go silent. Military reports stop mid-sentence. A city that was a functioning node in Japan's war network becomes a blank space. Far away, on the bomber, the crew feels the shockwave reach them as a shove, even at altitude, even at distance. They watch the mushroom cloud climb. It rises with the same terrible elegance as the one in New Mexico, except now it is anchored to a place where people were alive a minute ago. Tibbets turns the aircraft away. The mission is complete. The crew's voices are tight. There is no cheering. There is staring. There is silence. They have delivered something that cannot be undelivered. Hours later in Tokyo, confusion spreads through command centers. Hiroshima has stopped responding. A major city has vanished into silence. At first, officials suspect a massive conventional raid. Then they hear there was only one plane, only one aircraft reported. No fleet of bombers, no waves of incendiaries, only one. That does not fit any known pattern. At Imperial General Headquarters, officers crowd around radios and maps. An aide runs in with a message. Breathless, another follows with a contradictory report. The words are strained, as if written by someone whose mind is breaking under what he saw. A blinding flash, a crushing blast, a city engulfed. Some speak the word that has been floating like a rumor for weeks. Atomic, the room stills. A senior leader, his face composed by habit, asks for confirmation. He asks for details. He asks how one bomb could do this. His tone carries disbelief, not because he is naive, but because the alternative is too enormous. A scientist is summoned, or at least someone with enough technical understanding to interpret the fragments. He arrives sweating, carrying papers, and listens to the reports. The descriptions align with the physics of the unimaginable. Airburst, shockwave, heat, radiation, though they do not yet call it by the full name in daily speech. A weapon that does not just destroy buildings but poisons the survivors. In Tokyo, the leadership grapples with a new reality, but it is not yet fully accepted. Minds reach for explanations that preserve the old world. Maybe it was a fuel explosion. Maybe stored munitions detonated. Maybe the Americans used a new incendiary mix. Maybe it is exaggerated. But the pattern keeps returning. One plane, one bomb, one city. The Japanese strategic expectation, built on the idea that America would need invasion, built on the hope of negotiation, built on the endurance of the home front, begins to crack. Yet even cracking does not mean breaking. Some still believe this is a singular weapon. A one-time terror. They argue America cannot have many. They argue Japan can still hold out, still force conditions, still preserve honor, while they debate. The survivors in Hiroshima wander like ghosts along riverbanks, skin hanging, eyes burned, tongues swollen, calling for water that will not save them. The city smolders under a rising column of ash, and in American channels, another message moves. There is a second bomb. August 7 and August 8, 1945, Tokyo. The first day after Hiroshima is not clarity. It is chaos wrapped in formal language. Messages arrive in fragments. Reconnaissance aircraft report a city flattened. Medical officers relay accounts that sound like hallucination. Soldiers sent toward the ruins return with faces drained of color, describing people who look burned from the inside, skin patterned strangely, hair falling out in clumps, men and women collapsing days after surviving the blast. In conference rooms, the Supreme Council meets again, the air thick with sweat and cigarette smoke. The men around the table are not cowards. They have overseen years of war, years of decisions that killed millions. But this new weapon forces them into a different kind of fear, one they cannot control with discipline. One leader insists that America cannot have many atomic bombs. The United States may have sacrificed an enormous project to create a single device, he says, and used it as terror. Another counters that the Americans have factories beyond counting, and if they built one, they can build more. A third argues that even if the weapon exists, surrender will invite occupation and humiliation, and Japan must fight on to preserve the emperor's position and national essence. The argument circles because no one wants to say what their hearts already sense. Japan's strategy has been overwhelmed. The logic of prolonging the war, of forcing concessions through endurance, depends on the assumption that time favors Japan's will. Hiroshima proves that time might now favor the enemy. Each day might bring another city erased in a single flash. There is no defense against it in the air, no fleet to sink, no beach to fortify. The weapon bypasses every plan. Still, disbelief clings, because disbelief is a shield. Then another blow lands, one that slams shut the remaining hopes of diplomacy. On August 8th, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan. The news hits Tokyo like cold water to the face. For months, Japanese leaders have looked toward Moscow as a possible mediator, a channel to negotiate with the Western allies. That hope has been fragile, but it has existed. Now it is ash. Soviet armies begin surging into Japanese-held territory in Manchuria, moving with speed and mass that Japan's exhausted forces cannot match. For the Japanese leadership, this is not just a military crisis. It is the collapse of a political fantasy. The war is now closing from both sides. The United States has the skies and the sea. The Soviets have opened a land front. The idea of dragging the conflict into a negotiated settlement begins to look impossible. The Supreme Council meets in urgent session. Voices sharper now, tempers strained. A military member speaks of fighting on, of inflicting maximum casualties, of preserving honor and extracting better terms. A civilian member speaks of the nation's destruction, of starving cities, of the emperor's burden. The divide between factions hardens, and then the Americans strike again. August 9, 1945, Nagasaki. The second bomb does not hit Tokyo directly, but it hits the last remaining pillar of disbelief. A B-29 appears in the sky. The primary target is obscured. The aircraft shifts, and the bomb falls toward a valley city of shipyards and factories. The flash comes again. Another new sun. Another shockwave. Another mushroom cloud, climbing into the sky as if the heavens are being rewritten. The terrain shapes the destruction, hills and ridges channeling pressure, but the result is still catastrophic. Buildings collapse, fires roar. People die in an instant, and then in agony. And then days later from unseen sickness. In Tokyo, the reports arrive faster this time, because the leadership is already listening for them. There is no space left for alternative explanations. 2 cities have been destroyed by 2 single bombs, separated by only 3 days. 2, not 1. The argument that America cannot have more becomes harder to hold. Even if there are only 2, the threat is proven. And if there are more, which logic suggests there are, then every major city in Japan is now a hostage to a timetable dictated in Washington. The ministers and generals look at one another across the table, and in their eyes is the moment of understanding that changes history. It is not only that the Americans possess a terrifying weapon, it is that Japan has no answer, not in the air, not at sea, not on land, not in diplomacy. Some leaders respond with rage, the way a cornered man responds. Others respond with a kind of numb calculation. What can be saved? The emperor's voice becomes more present in their minds, even when he is not in the room. In Japan's system, ultimate authority rests with him, but the war has been directed through councils and military power. Now, the weight of decision presses toward the one figure who can break deadlock without destroying the structure of legitimacy. In the corridors, aides whisper that the nation will not survive another strike. In shelters, civilians pray for raids that might not come, because the raids they have learned to fear are at least predictable. People talk about a bomb that makes shadows permanent. They speak of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as if they are warnings from the sky. In the Supreme Council, the debate becomes a battle of futures. One future is surrender, occupation, uncertainty, but survival. The other future is continued war under atomic threat and Soviet invasion, which may mean national annihilation. A general pounds a fist lightly on the table. Voice controlled but intense. He says Japan must fight, must show resolve, must not yield. A minister answers that resolve means nothing if there is nothing left to resolve with. The country becomes a wasteland. Another voice asks whether America will destroy Tokyo next. That question hangs in the air, unanswerable, because no one knows the American schedule, but everyone now knows the Americans can do it. The disbelief has shattered. The strategic expectations have been overwhelmed not by a fleet, not by an invasion, but by a flash in the sky that turns entire cities into evidence. The war has reached its final chamber, and now the Emperor must speak. August 10 to August 15, 1945. Tokyo. The air in the capital is heavy with summer and dread. Even the cicadas outside the government building sound like a warning, their constant buzz filling the silences between arguments. Inside, the machinery of state grinds through the most dangerous days Japan has ever faced. Not because American bombers are overhead, but because the country's leaders are at war with one another about what survival means. In the imperial palace, the emperor is briefed in careful language. He's been sheltered from some brutal details during the war, but now the horror cannot be softened. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are not described as normal raids. They are described as annihilation. The Soviet invasion is described as unstoppable momentum. The home islands are described as starving, exhausted, increasingly defenseless. The emperor listens, expression restrained, eyes lowered. Those around him try to read his face, but he gives them little. Yet his presence changes the room. Men who have shouted in council meetings now speak more quietly when he is near. It is as if the entire nation is holding its breath, waiting to hear whether the symbol at its center will choose sacrifice or survival. The Supreme Council meets again. The same arguments collide. Military leaders speak of honor, of fighting to the last, of making the enemy pay. Civilian leaders speak of the country's destruction and the duty to protect what remains. Each side uses the emperor's name as if it is a shield, claiming to defend him while pulling him toward their own vision. But the atomic bomb has altered the ground under every word. A strategy built on inflicting casualties assumes the enemy must come close. The new weapon does not need proximity. It does not need beaches. It does not need fleets. It turns cities into proof. It makes every hour a countdown Japan cannot control. The emperor decides he must break the deadlock. In a conference where senior leaders kneel in formal posture, the emperor speaks with a calm that carries more power than any shouted command. He acknowledges the unbearable. He speaks of continuing the war leading only to further destruction. He points to the new bomb as a reason the conflict has changed beyond measure. His voice is not loud, but it is final. The decision is made to accept surrender under certain conditions. Above all, the preservation of the imperial institution. Messages are drafted, refined, rewritten. The word choice becomes life and death. Then comes the most dangerous internal moment. Not everyone accepts the decision within the military, especially among younger officers and hardline factions. Surrender feels like betrayal. They have been raised on the idea that death is preferable to submission. Some believe Japan can still fight. Some believe the Americans are bluffing about more atomic bombs. Some believe the emperor is being misled. A plot forms in the shadows. On the night of August 14th, elements within the army move to seize control of key points in Tokyo. Their goal is to prevent the surrender announcement from reaching the public. They believe if they can stop the emperor's voice from being broadcast, they can force the government back into continuing the war. In the palace grounds, guards tense, unsure which orders to obey. Officers in boots move through corridors where only soft footfalls are usually heard. There are brief standoffs, shouted commands, confusion, and fear of bloodshed in the sacred center of Japan. The most critical object in Japan that night is not a sword or a rifle. It is a recording. The emperor's surrender message has been captured onto discs, and those discs must be protected, hidden, carried through corridors and past men who might kill for them. Courtiers and loyal officers move with quiet urgency, faces pale, hands steady. The discs change hands in whispered exchanges. Doors open and close. A hallway that has known centuries of ritual now holds a modern struggle, one that feels like the nation's soul is being smuggled toward dawn. The coup fails, not with one decisive battle, but with the slow collapse of momentum. Some commanders refuse to support it. Confusion spreads. A few officers realize they cannot defy the emperor without shattering the legitimacy they claim to defend. Others choose suicide rather than accept the outcome. Morning arrives. August 15, 1945. Radios across Japan crackle, and families gather around them in damaged homes, in shelters, in rooms where windows have been covered since the raids began. Many do not know exactly what they are about to hear. They only know the war has become unbearable. The emperor's voice, rarely heard by ordinary citizens, fills the air. The language is formal, difficult, but the meaning sinks in like a stone. Japan will end the war. Japan will accept the terms. The conflict that has consumed the nation is over. Across the home islands, reactions ripple outward. Some weep from relief. Some weep from humiliation. Some sit in silence, unable to process that the world they believed in has just ended. In the councils and headquarters, Japanese leaders absorb the finality. Some are stunned. Some are bitter. Some feel a grim gratitude that something remains to rebuild. But all of them now understand what the Trinity test in a New Mexico desert truly meant. Even if they did not know the name of the place, even if they never imagined the flash that rose there would reach them, the Trinity detonation was not just a test. It was a door opening. It opened onto Hiroshima. It opened onto Nagasaki. It opened onto a geopolitical reality where a single device could decide the fate of nations. Japan's strategic expectations had been built around conventional limits, around the belief that endurance and negotiation could shape the outcome. The atomic bomb erased that framework in an instant, replacing it with a new calculus of terror, speed, and irreversible consequence. In the weeks that follow, American occupation forces arrive. Papers are signed. Weapons are surrendered. Prisoners return. Cities begin the slow work of clearing rubble. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, survivors live with injuries that do not heal cleanly. The nation begins to rebuild, carrying trauma into its future. And the world, watching what happened to Japan, steps into the atomic age with eyes newly opened. A desert in New Mexico proved the physics. 2 Japanese cities proved the reality. And the echo of that first flash, on July 16, 1945, will never fully fade from human history.